Friends and Loss. Friends and Loss, the era of Scotty Shaddox. Another day, and I was taken to Caselli's therapy room. I felt like a fish in Caselli's fish tank, where he would observe and tap his pen at me, and I was to respond to his taps and be entertaining. Also, per our routine, Dr. Garcia, Brandon, and Hyder would greet me from their iPad chat windows. Dr. Caselli would always say something in the vein of, "Richard, let's get right to it." And so I would get right on it and begin sharing my stories. And here are today's stories of my memories. We had moved next door to the Shaddox family. We didn't know them when we first moved in. They had 2 sons. I became best friends with the youngest son, who went by the name Scotty. We became friends for many, many years, though only a few were as neighbors. We'll talk more about that later. Scotty and I were inseparable. Scotty's father worked at an automobile manufacturing plant as a parts assembly man, which apparently meant he used hydraulic tools to attach vehicle components to cars as they moved down assembly lines. It was long, hard labor, but it paid well because it was a union job, as he would tell. His father was resourceful, and he enjoyed marijuana recreationally. He did not want to deal with drug dealers or the underbelly of lowly drug pushers, and so he built a secret wall in his garage with a secret panel that went into a secret room. He lined his secret room with old gallon-sized plastic milk cartons filled with water. They were insulation. He had built a secret weed grow-op room. He even suspended water-filled jugs along the roof. He grew a dozen or more marijuana plants in that garage chamber grow-op operation, completely out of sight, yet in the middle of suburbia. Scotty's father's goal was to be self-sufficient, net zero in his growing and consumption ratio. But if he ever had a little extra, he always had friends or coworkers that would be happy to purchase it from him. While walking home from school one afternoon with Scotty, we noticed what looked like a television set in a garbage can that was set out for pickup that day. Well, we snooped and we saw it was a video game TV. It was a self-contained unit for Pong, an old home arcade game. We took it home, and to our shock, it worked. It was a hybrid of mechanical paddles with electronic control and display on its built-in TV. It was like a video game console, but one single game for 2 players to play Pong. For us, it was awesome. I had never seen, much less played, a video game before. We played for hours and hours and hours together. We shared who had custody of the Pong TV every few days. Scotty's brother Curtis was a heavy drug addict, though, and he was prone to irrational and unpredictable actions. His brother Curtis was a jerk, and he was a thief, without any evident integrity. I struggled to understand why Scotty ever stood up for him and defended him, despite Curtis's verbal and brotherly physical abuse of him. In fact, Scotty sometimes tried to justify Curtis's actions as merely those of a frustrated brother with few options in life other than to follow in his father's footsteps, a weed-smoking auto assembly line worker. Curtis did not respect his father much, and his father did not respect Curtis at all. There were 2 times I witnessed Curtis and his father in their kitchen. Both times, Curtis's father struck him violently in the face. One time, I swear, Curtis's father broke Curtis's nose as his blood went everywhere across the table and the floor and the wall, and his nose bent unnaturally to the side. Curtis was thrown onto the table by his father, onto the floor, and against the wall. He was thrown all around and he would fly and fall. Curtis's father would just keep on going until I would hear Curtis finally plead for him to stop in tears. His father would declare some words condemning Curtis's bad behavior, being a thief and a liar. He would assert his punishment was for his own good. I'm sure you've heard that abuser story before. His father justified the abuse by his belief that beating education into his son would somehow imbue integrity and wisdom where there was otherwise none. Well, I think his father's approach to parenting did not work. Curtis was a drug addict, an in-kind abuser like his father. I think it was his drafting behind and modeling after his father while simultaneously rebelling and self-medicating. I think Curtis was messed up, and he did not know how to handle his life or situation then, and he never did. On a weekend when Scotty had custody of that ping pong TV machine game, Curtis took the device and disassembled it to see how it worked. Of course, he could not put it back together. My mother tried as well to fix the Pong TV, but despite her own television repair experience, because he both broke and lost parts, she could not salvage it. Curtis had ruined our Pong TV game, the only gaming toy I had ever owned, certainly that I had ever shared. I learned never to trust people with anything that I valued, not even my best friend. Even if they could be trusted by themselves, someone around them might not be trusted. It does not matter why someone cannot be trusted either. Therefore, no one can truly be trusted with anything so valuable to me, because everyone has someone else in their life, and that someone else might make them turn against me. I learned the phrase trust but verify during the Cold War between Russia and the United States. US President Ronald Reagan and Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev began the end of the Cold War with a treaty that was fundamentally based on trust but verify. It was a harsh lesson, but one that would shape my views throughout life about everyone. Trust but verify. Limit the harm of betrayal. A friend of mine, Scotty Shaddox, he accidentally once sat down on a bullfrog. The poor frog was crushed, but still left alive, and let out the most horrifying, high-pitched moan of death as its death rattle. I had never heard a frog or toad make any sound so croaking. And ribbit, it wasn't ribbit, it was croaking. It was going to die. But this bullfrog had the voice of a person as it shrilled towards its demise. I could not let it suffer, and I leapt to get the largest rock-like boulder I could find, and I smashed it down on the toad with all of my strength. It was dead. Just like that. It was free of pain. It was free of suffering. I felt terrible. But I also believed that it was the right thing to do, to free the tormenting poor frog. Later, we moved during my second and third grade school transition window from South San Jose, California to San Martin, California. After my mother married Sam, a man she met in Parents Without Partners, with help from his Veterans Administration or VA loan due to his service in the Navy, he and my mother bought a house in San Martin. My best friend as a kid, Scotty Shaddox, and I had been separated by almost an hour-and-a-half drive on a long Monterey Highway road that connected San Jose with the South County cities and unincorporated county areas like San Martin. We were little kids and had no way of seeing each other. Even talking on the phone was a long-distance phone call and was too expensive beyond a simple coordinated call for brief minutes. It appeared my parents moved to improve our quality of life and put a stake in the ground as a home-owning family. It was a far cry from living in a car with my mother for days, even weeks at times. And it was certainly better than any of the flops or cheap no-background check rentals that we had been living in. It was an improvement for sure. The parents of my best friend of the time for many years, Scotty Shaddox, agreed that he could visit us at least once or twice a month for sleepover weekends. My parents had moved nearly an hour-and-a-half bus ride away from Scotty's house, where previously we had been neighbors, so it was a commitment to visit each other. Living that hour-and-a-half away from Scotty translated into at least 1 hour-long bus ride with transfers, an additional half-hour time, and waits and delays at those bus stops. And from there, I would either pull or push some small suitcase packed for the weekend, at least 7 or so blocks to Scotty's house from a bus stop. It was a level walk though, and it wasn't that far. Sometimes Scotty's father would even pick me up if he was available. Scotty's visit to me in San Martin followed the same process. However, Scotty's mother would drive him to our house most of the time, and very rarely drop him off at a bus stop that was only 30 minutes away, because at their point there'd be no transfers. Scotty, like me, was very independent, and his father encouraged it, but his mother, on the other hand, well, she tended a little more like the protectionist side of parenting of that era, which just meant that she would drive him wherever he was going to go and generally be aware of what he was up to. As we aged, the distance made it easy to grow apart though. By the time I could drive, we no longer had much contact at all. I visited the house he lived at with his parents and saw his brother Curtis. Curtis boasted that he was clean now of drug abuse, but that he would be an addict for the rest of his life. He asserted that he now rode bicycles every time he wanted drugs. He rode his bicycle several times a day. He said his addiction remained strong. Unfortunately, Curtis also said that Scotty had fallen into his prior footsteps and now used excessive recreational drugs. And now that after Scotty apparently entered some new relationship, his new girlfriend was also an illicit drug abuser. So Curtis cautioned that I would be unhappy to see Scotty this way, and that Scotty would probably be angry for me to see what he had become. Oh well, I decided to give Curtis my phone number so that Scotty could call me if he ever wanted to. Scotty never called me. It was clear that Scotty had been lost to his libertine pleasures, to the drugs that he had decided to abuse. Scotty was my best friend and gave me genuine companionship as a young child. We just hit it off and remained close best friends for at least a decade. We overcame moving far away and kept our connection despite the cost, the effort, and the time. True friendship is invaluable, I thought. Unfortunately, friends go away. Friends fall victim to addiction. They fade away into new relationships and families. They prove that they were not the friends after all, and they betray you. And of course, they die. There are limitless reasons that friendships end. But my fond memories and the things I learned were and remain important to me. I am glad to have had my friendships in my life. They are one of the greatest good things that I did have in my life.